You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Elesh Norn, the mother of machines, is a new staple in multiple formats. But is she just for Elesh Normies? Today we challenge the machine orthodoxy with fresh brews in Modern and Pioneer, plus testing with Mindsplice Apparatus and Tyvar Jubilant Brawler. That's all coming up on Faithless Brewing. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the Faithless Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Schriever, also known as Cave Dan, and I'm joined today all the way from Argentina. You know him as Moored to Light. It's Emmy Sagasti. Emmy, welcome.
Heyo! How are we doing, Dan? Up for some beautiful cards tonight?
Always. You know it. Always ready.
Always ready, and tonight we're firing all our brewing engines with a beautiful, apparently modern staple all of a sudden.
Oh gosh, yeah. Talking about Elesh Norn today, mother of machines.
Mummy?
Machine mommy.
Just mummy.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if this was going to be a worthwhile card for us to do a week around. Either because it wasn't going to be powerful enough or because it was going to be too powerful. It's somewhere in between. So we figured we might as well take the time to just go through what's been happening with Elesh Norn and see where there's still further brewing space. So this is our brew session. It's going to be all deck lists all the time. Got a bunch of Elesh decks. We'll also have our flashback segment. Bunch of decks to talk about there. We tested Mindsplice Apparatus from last week. And if there's time, I would like to do a little follow-up on Tyvar Jubilant Brawler, the first card that we highlighted from our Phyrexia All Will Be One season, because Tyvar's been doing well. A lot of iteration, a lot of updates there, and a bunch of new Tyvar decks have been succeeding in multiple formats.
Yeah. Apparently being super hard to remove is enough for a creature to stick even without an ETB.
It's a strange time to be alive.
Where a 4/7 non-ETB creature is making waves in Modern?
So that's the order of business, the plan of attack for today. Before we dive into the deck lists, just a reminder at the top that if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, you can do so. You can go to our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/faithlessbrewing. You can make a pledge at any tier you like. It can be $1 a show. That's just a nice way of giving back, help support us, help keep us going, help say, hey, thanks for filling my head with these crazy ideas about terrible brews. Every once in a while, we have good ideas too, but make no promises.
Like once in a few blue moons, we come up with something out of this world. But then we get being back to reality by Rivas.
Exactly. But yeah, you'll get access to our wonderful Discord community, as well as other perks if you're into merch, if you like to suggest cards for us, if you want to vote on cards. Those are all benefits you'll receive by being a patron as well.
Exactly.
All right, enough of that. On to the card of the week. Tell me about Elesh Norn, the mother of machines.
So, Elesh Norn, the final iteration, actually not final, second iteration, 2 of 3, for a 5-mana 4/7 Phyrexian Praetor with Vigilance. So no ETB, nothing insane, but she has 2 lines of text that super matter. First, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a trigger ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And secondly, permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities or permanents your opponents control to trigger. So we have a Panharmonicon that also works as an opposing Panharmonicon to your opponent, literally causing them their abilities to not trigger. This ranges from ETBs from Solitude, Leyline Binding, Balaku triggers, literally anything gets shut down.
And this isn't even her final form yet. She kind of hoards all the triggers for herself. Double for me, none for you.
she will have all the triggers. And it gets super out of control fast. And more importantly, in the modern metagame, we're not playing stuff like Dreadboard or Terminate. And Holy Hit doesn't kill this, Bolt doesn't kill this, Leyline Binding can't kill this, Solitude can't kill this. It's super hard to remove.
Right, so there's the question of what Elesh Norn does for you. There's the question of what Elesh Norn does against your opponent. There's also the question of, does Elesh Norn survive? Does she die to removal? Just like Mort is saying, it's not entirely clear that she does die to removal. She's pretty hard to get off the battlefield, given the cards people like to play, right? People like to play Leyline Bindings and Solitudes to handle all the threats. Elesh Norn shuts those down. Unholy Heat, not enough damage. So yeah, it's pretty tricky to kill an Elesh Norn.
And if he's left alive, it's super easy to see how her first ability will get super out of control. Playing a Leyline Binding, exiling 2 things, playing a Solitude, getting rid of 2 things, Fury of Fate, Multi-Drifter, draw 4.
So I think we all understand intuitively like how this card is supposed to work, but there are a few little details that you should just keep in mind if you're going to build an Elesh Norn deck. One is that we're talking about getting additional triggers. This is not the same as doubling, right? So if you somehow stack up many copies of Elesh Norn, like with a Spark Double or whatever, or if you have a Panharmonicon in play, you're just getting 1 extra for each extra copy of Elesh Norn. It works for any type of permanent causing any type of ETB trigger, that is an enter the battlefield trigger. We're used to seeing this on creatures, right? Like we're used to blink decks with creatures, but expand that to the full range of permanents.
Abundant Growth drawing 2, Dress Down drawing 2. Fun fact, if you both and your opponent both have a Dress Down, both have an Elesh Norn and you play a Dress Down, you're just gonna draw 1 card.
Is that true?
Yeah. Dress Down shuts everything as it enters, and then when it enters, it draws a card.
Okay, so there is a cure. Dress Down, the cure for Phyrexia.
It will disable all the Elesh Norns. Yours, your opponents, all Elesh Norns will be deleted.
Doubles up artifact triggers if you have anything like that. So if it's a vehicle, if you're playing a Seeker's Chariot, that you'll get twice that trigger. Double your Sky Sovereign triggers. Even things that don't look like ETB triggers, like Landfall, for example, does not look like an ETB trigger, but...
Balakut.
Yeah, exactly. That checks for a land entering the battlefield, and that's exactly what Elesh Norn is checking for. So anytime a landfall happens, so Valakut, Omnath is another big one where this interaction comes up, you'll just get double that effect.
Worth noting, Kadus don't bounce back to your opponent's hand.
Exactly. So shutting off triggers might not always be a good thing for you. Just be aware of that, right? If your opponent is playing a Lotus Field, they just get a free Lotus Field. If you are playing a Lotus Field, you will sacrifice 4 lands. So just be aware of that. And I mention this because actually we have a list proposed that David has drawn up here that has that exact interaction in it. So just don't make that blunder. Like obviously he's aware of this. You just have to sequence. Don't play Lotus Field when your Elesh Norn is down if you are not intending to sacrifice 4 lands.
It's ideal to not sacrifice 4 lands.
Yeah. And there's apparently an interesting bug. So Elesh Norn should not affect cards that are in the graveyard. Currently, it does shut down Bloodghast, and it's not supposed to.
Okay, that's just Empty Show being Empty Show, though.
Exactly. The reason being that Bloodghast is not a permanent your opponent controls while it's in the graveyard. So it should still be able to see a land entering and should still come back from that. Sagas, last thing to mention, Sagas are not ETB triggers, although we may think of them that way. They are actually just using a different mechanic entirely.
Yeah, they're getting a counter as they enter and that triggers.
Right. So the effects from the Sagas are caused by chapter counters being added. That's not the same thing as being caused by entering the battlefield.
Yeah, exactly. So don't think you're gonna get double your trigger from any of the sagas you can think of. No Fable double, no Showdown of the Skulls doubling, which would be amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that would be too nuts. The card is good enough as it is.
So then what were we looking for? Landfall, creatures with ATVs, good exile space removal like Portable Hole, Binding, Ossification also came in the same set being great.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, this is just how Magic is played in 2023, and it's going to be like this for a long time to come. Yeah, they can't help it. When they want to make something constructed, playable, or powerful, they give you a card plus a trigger. Enter the battlefield trigger. That's just going to be good for the rest of time. So Elesh Norn is already good and is just going to keep getting better. In that sense, is this an interesting card? I'm not sure anymore. Like, I almost feel like this is a little bit played out. Like, I'm kind of over it. But that's as more so, like, as I talked about on our Monday show, I was trying to play this Eldrazi deck against, a field full of Solitudes. And at that point, I was like, all right, I'm done with this. If I never see another Ephemerate again, if nothing else triggers ever again, I'd be happy. But these are the cards that exist.
This is the world we live in.
Exactly. So that's a little segue here to some decks. We're going to review some of the Elesh Norn decks that are currently doing well and talk about a few more directions to explore. Right off the bat is a list that I've seen called French Obosh. This list broke through in a Modern Challenge a couple of weeks ago, started winning, a lot of people picked it up, and eventually settled on the name French Obosh because I guess Xenowan is a French player, is that right?
That was the name Quatre, who is the challenge winner and also biggest brewer with the deck, said he named it Quatre, of course, being 4 in French, which makes perfect sense.
So how does this deck work? What makes it distinctive?
So it works on the fact that it's pretty good paired against any of the red decks because you have an insane amount of removal. 4 Bolt, 3 March, 3 Ending, 4 Solitude, 4 Fury. And you get to play against big mana or 4 color decks in the fact you have Elesh Norn and Blood Moon should lock them out of the game.
Elesh Norn's rule here, apart from its defensive properties, it doubles up your Furies, doubles up your Solitudes,
your Seasoned Pyromancers, and more than anything, just locks your opponent out of the game.
Right, you might think, oh, well, obviously they're going to play Leyline Binding here, right? That's a no-brainer. But actually, that kind of messes with the mana base, so they don't opt for Leyline Binding. They're still playing classic Prismatic Ending. So it's got a limited suite of stuff that it's designed to double, but it's still just so powerful that it's really just the sign of the end times when Elesh Norn comes down.
Yeah.
The other card that you would not expect is Timeless Dragon. There's 3 copies of Timeless Dragon here, and I don't quite understand why.
It really helps with the mana. Getting the planes when you're playing that many fetches happens a lot. Also the fact it's just a good 2-for-1 threat when you're playing Obosh. It's this on Bone Crusher, but this actually helps you with the mana. 22 lands is not that many, so like these 3 dragons are acting like 1 or 2 extra lands in the deck.
Okay.
Like, if you look at the mana base, 22 is a bit low.
Yeah, for what is ultimately a mid-range control deck, right? This is going to take a long time to win the game. It's more just like 2-for-1s forever until suddenly your 2-for-1s become 3-for-1s. In the early game, that might mean 1-for-2, right? You do have to pitch sometimes to keep pace, but you can easily make that up with the Seasoned Pyromancer, with the Timeless Dragons, and of course, when Elesh Norn hits, you'll get everything.
Yeah. Elesh Norn is just being a perfect top end for this sort of deck.
All right, so this is a brew in the sense that it's combining the good ETB cards in a new way, but it doesn't speak to me as a brewer. I'll just say that personally. And this is maybe just we've seen too much of the elementals. I don't find myself drawn to decks like this anymore.
This is just not your playstyle anymore. It's too far gone.
I think so. Maybe it's just like it feels like it's new and yet it's not new. If that makes sense.
It's not new enough. It's just a new iteration of the same.
The next list here, I mean, all these cards are going to be using ETB creatures, and there's like a fairly narrow suite of good ones. But the next list here is very cool.
Yeah, this is a lot more spicy. This is Spike's version of Elesh Norn.
So Aspiring Spike has been mucking around with a Heartless summoning brought back Elementals deck with 3 Elesh Norns. Heartless summoning and brought back both cost 2. They both give you a boost of mana, potentially 2 mana, so they can take you from 2 to 5 very quickly. They both work beautifully with just the evoke mechanic in slightly different ways, right? So you're the brought back OG, right? Like, what do you like about brought back? What do you see it doing?
So Broadback here can work amazingly well mostly as a ramp spell. You are playing 12 fetch lands in order to try and get consistently a turn 2 Broadback either with double fetch land or with a Solitude to try and get back in the game if you're behind. And then in the late game it can do amazing stuff. For example, with Avalanche Rider, you play it on turn 3 or 4, it dies on your next upkeep because no one pays the echo, and you can bring it back alongside a mood, and you can go something like turn 4 Avalanche Rider, turn 5, evoke a Muldrifter, fetch land, brought back, get back Avalanche Rider and Muldrifter, draw 4 cards, get rid of 2 of your opponent's land, and just run away with the game.
So the way this deck will often play out is it's just got a pile of fetch lands. You'll just play a fetch, leave it uncracked on turn 1. Turn 2, maybe you'll play another fetch and leave it uncracked. Right? What's going to happen from there? Well, you're representing brought back to ramp you to 5. You're also representing, crack fetch, get a Triumph, crack fetch, get a shock, play a Leyline Binding. There's 4 Leyline Bindings here. They work great with Elesh Norn for 1 mana, double Path to Exile. What you can also do is just slam the Heartless Summoning on turn 2, and then you're looking at, okay, maybe next turn I evoke a Muldrifter for a single blue. Maybe I ephemerate that Muldrifter. Maybe I play a Muldrifter and an Avalanche Riders, right? This doesn't have to get blinked. It's just, a Divination for 1 and a Stone Rain for 2. That's pretty good. Anything to just get you into the longer game. The longer the game goes, the more you're likely to run away with things. There's 4 Solitudes, there's 4 Wall of Omens, there's 4 Ephemerates, 3 Elesh Norns, and a single Golos on top.
Just in case. As a tiny bit of spice. My only problem with this deck is sometimes I'm afraid I will run out of threads. This deck plays literally 16 creatures capable of attacking. And nothing else.
Think you'll run out of deck before you kill them?
That might happen, especially with Muldrifter and Avalanche Rider being the easiest things to kill in the country. But that's where Emeria comes in. This is a mono-white 5-color deck.
Every land is a plains. That means that you have Emeria the Sky Ruin, which eventually brought back will get you there. You're even allowed to play Idyllic Grange. This is the white member of the Eldraine land cycle. Elesh Norn will double that trigger, right? Like, this is not a card that we have seen really used effectively, just because the risk of it coming into play tapped is usually enough to put off people who are interested in +1/+1 effects. But it's kind of free here, so, Spike had a fun screenshot where he had the Heartless Summoning in play, so his Elesh Norn was only a 3/6. They went for Unholy Heat, and he responded by cracking a fetch and putting Idyllic Range into play to boost his Elesh Norn twice. That's the dream. I mean, if that only happens once and you can tweet it out, that's worth it.
Yeah. Idyllic Range is a spice. So there's a screenshot of Spike saving a creature by giving it +2/+2 with a Idyllic Range thanks to Elesh Norn, and that's just golden.
So, from there, what's next? These are closer to tier decks, I would say. I mean, these next ones, the Elementals deck with Elesh Norn, sometimes called Elesh-mentals.
Has slowly made its way into the meta, yeah.
Elementals, as we know, likes to play cards like Risen Reef, Fury, Solitude, Omnath, Locust Creation. You can just put all this together and put some number of Elesh Norns into the deck, right? Maybe it's just 1 because you're playing Eladamri's Call. Having Solitudes, having Endurance in your deck subsidizes the mana cost of Eladamri's Call, so that even though it adds 2 to whatever you're eventually going to cast, if you're just using it defensively to tutor up a removal spell, it's like, yeah, it's all upside there. And just having 1 copy of Elesh Norn for the Eladamri's Call to find is just so powerful, because if you ever get to untap with Elesh Norn, you just go nuts. We talked about this during Atraxa week. Some people were going so far as to also include 1 Atraxa as an Eladamri's Call target, but I think people have decided you don't have to go that far. Elesh Norn is enough.
So if we're looking at what Spike is playing right now, I got a screenshot by a friend a few minutes ago. I'm gonna read you some of the cards in this beautiful deck list, and you're gonna make your conclusions, okay? 4 Ephemerate, 4 Eldritch Evolution, Atraxa, Solitude, Muldrifter, Elesh Norn, Omnath, Avalanche Rider, Renegade Rallier, Walls, Eternal Witness, Renan 6.
Yeah.
Have we strayed too far away from God's light when we're playing Eldritch Evolution in 4-color? Also 2 Renegade Rallier.
I mean, Renegade Rallier is pretty good. It ramps you lands, it gets you up there, and it's that 3-drop you need to go get your Elesh Norn.
It's also the Rallier Dream of turn 3 Rallier, get back a land ephemerate, and it's a 1 mana double ramp. Like Rallier plus ephemerate is 3 mana, get up to 7 mana on turn 4. Because you get 2 ephemerate, so you get the initial ramp with the Rallier plus 2 from the ephemerates. So you can hardcast attacks on turn 4 with an ephemerate.
Oh god. Triple ramp off a Renegade Rallier. That's nuts.
That's how it works. I used to do that with Enigmatic. It was super fun.
What made you stop?
Losing both Lurrus and Yorion in Enigmatic, which played Lurrus in the main deck and Yorion in the side.
Did you find that Renegade Rallier was a fine modern card, or was it like a little bit underpowered?
I think it's a fine modern card. There's also a lot of the time where you just go turn 2, Ren and 6, it dies, and you turn 3, Rallier it back. And that's just insanely powerful.
So possibly Spike playing with this list, which I haven't tuned into that yet, but may be working with some of the concepts that the player Respect the Cat has been working with, namely 4 Eldritch Evolution in what is otherwise a value mid-range deck.
Yeah.
Respect the Cat plays a slightly different version. It's a little bit smaller, right? It's a little bit heavier on 2 mana cantrip creatures, 4 Icefang Quaddle, 4 Wall of Omens, 1 Wall of Blossom. So we really, really want a cantrip creature on 2. We can then use our 4 Eldritch Evolution to convert that into a useful 4-drop, most likely the 2 Omnaths here. But there's also 1 Elesh Norn, there's 4 Solitude, a mix of, 3s, like there's an Eternal Witness, a Night of Autumn, 2 Ether Channelers and Endurance, 2 Ephemerates, 2 Prismatic Endings, 2 Elite Armory's Call, 4 Eldritch Evolution, 4 Abundant Growth. It looks like a Yorion deck that just, Yorion was banned, they didn't get the memo, so they just kept playing the deck and trimmed it down to 60 cards.
Ah, my sweet brains.
I don't quite follow the Eldritch Evolution. I don't know. What do you think about this?
I'm not sure yet. Like, I wanna love it, but I haven't tried it enough to say I love it. This sounds perfect, but does it play as good as it sounds?
Is this almost just like a Soul Herder deck for the new era? Like, Soul Herder is too small.
It might be the Soul Herder of the new era. This is what we're evolving into.
Strange times in Modern, but this is the new world. This is the new Phyrexian multiverse.
We have reached this point where everything is just gonna go darker and darker.
All right, so those are some Elesh Norn decks in Modern. Some proven, some up and coming. A lot of triggers will be happening for your opponents, and a lot of your triggers will not be happening. Let's shift over to Pioneer. What have we seen in Pioneer so far? Well, I talked last week about the 4-color Omnath to Light deck that showed up in the Pro Tour, where they cut Niv Mizzet, but they still kept 4 Bring to Light because it's just that powerful to be able to bring to light for your 1 Elesh Norn, combine that with Omnath and just go nuts. And I talked about my version that I tested, which got even greedier and added a Atraxa to it. The deck is pretty good. It's not amazing or anything like that. I've actually been having pretty good success beating up on it during the leagues with other decks, but it's definitely a player. What else can you do with Elesh Norn? Well, David has been telling us about his take on Elesh. He's postulating that you don't just want, the 1 copy as your tutor target. You just want to draw Elesh Norn as early and often as you can. And he had sketched up a green-white list with full 4 Elesh Norn, 60 cards, no Yorion, just trying to draw Elesh Norn immediately. Ramp to it gradually, right? He has 2 mana ramp to avoid, being soft to Fatal Push. So he has the 7 Caryatids, he has the Prosperous Innkeepers.
The guaranteed ramp, the one that cannot fail.
Exactly, the 1 ramp that never lets you down.
Never gonna let you down.
And he tested this deck out. The first build was a 2-3 results, made some tweaks, cut some of the underperformers, and came back with a 3-2 and said it was feeling stronger. The underperformers turned out to be the Kiora and Topiary Stomper package, which is always a bit speculative, Topiary Stomper.
I mean, I only see one... Oh, give me a second. I only see one huge mistake with the deck list. It doesn't have Yorion. Why doesn't this have Yorion? David, why?
He just refuses to do it. He won't do it.
I mean, we have D-Chef's example of that Yorion works with this. Why can't we trust?
So philosophically, the only disagreement that I have with David about this build is the ramp package. I keep advocating for a Llanowar Elf and Elvish Mystic. I think you just want to get your stuff down as early as you can. David likes to dodge removal. He doesn't like to be, vulnerable to push. He does like the Prosperous Innkeeper. I think he has a note here that the doubling up of triggers for Elesh Norn actually just gains you so much life from the Innkeeper that really helps you stabilize as you get to that later game where you're taking control. So that's interesting. And that's also in the DJF's version, which does play Yorion, as Mord would insist is correct.
Always.
So DJF is playing Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elf, and Prosperous Innkeeper, and Golog Readers, instead of where David just has the Sylvan Caryatid, Innkeeper, and the Llanowar Visionaries. So there's a lot of cards to play around with. I mean, this is like the second or third tier of ETB effects, the ones that are not good enough for Modern, but are still useful, right? Chariot's very good. David's messing around with different stuff. I think his new version has Thalia's Lancers. He is trying a Yasharn, although I think he discovered that Yasharn incidentally shutting off your own treasures was too punishing. So he said Yasharn is cut from the team. Probably going to try Ambitious Farmhand instead. The good cards are the Portable Holes, the Oath of Nissas, the Elesh Norns, and the Chariots, or these are the cards you want to maximize.
Elesh Norn plus Oath of Nissa sounds pretty amazing. They looked 6 deep.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best cards. And if you look at DJF's 5.0 version from, I think, the first week of the format, he's trying a different suite. He's trying the Thraben Inspector. He's got the Charming Prince.
Yeah.
He's got Touch the Spirit Realm, and even he's got Combat Thresher.
Yeah, alongside Glorious Protector and Esiga's Chariot. That's like... No, sorry, the Esiga's Chariot is always there, but the Glorious Protector is the spicy one.
Yeah, and I think he said that it wasn't that good.
No, it wasn't.
Probably wouldn't play that one again. But I think between these two, I mean, you have a full suite of stuff to choose from in green and white. All of the white removal is pretty good with Elesh Norn, and it's pretty good against the field at large. So when David was testing his build, right, he found that sometimes against green white angels, he just completely shut down the entire deck. On the other hand, some technology will still get you. I think he got paired against auras, green white auras, and they brought in Hushbringers, which just crushes the entire concept of a blink deck. So he got out-teched by the Hushbringer. And against the mono-white deck, it seemed like the Elesh Norn was going to be good, but they were playing, instead of Ossification, they were playing Lay Down Arms, which was able to just cleanly exile the Elesh Norn.
Maybe they have made that sweep just because of that.
I mean, if they've done that, that's very next level, if that is what happened. So some 3D, 4D chess happening in the new Elesh Norn meta in Pioneer.
In the Pioneer Norn meta.
Exactly. David has a note here that Elesh Norn shut down Rampaging Ferocodon, so all kinds of weird stuff will come up with this card. It will take some getting used to.
Yeah.
He's also gifted us one last Elesh Norn brew to consider.
This is insanity. This one is insanity.
Full warning, this one is playing Lotus Field with Elesh Norn, so use at your own risk. Do not play Lotus Field after Elesh Norn if you don't want to sacrifice 4 lands. However, you do have Blood Sun, so this may not happen. You may get the Blood Sun down, and then it's just pure profit.
And draw 2 cards of Elesh Norn.
So tell me about this build, Mord. How does this work?
So we have 4 Immediate Scholar lands and 2 Balakut Awakening. This is going to be super relevant in a few minutes, as you're actually looking forward for Lotus Field to sacrifice these lands in the early game. After that, 3 Portable Hole, 4 Knight of the Wild Orchid alongside 4 Bone Crusher as interaction, 4 Blood Sun for, of course, Lotus Field, 4 Fable of the Mirror Breaker because it's Fable of the Mirror Breaker, why wouldn't you? 4 Kiora, Behemoth Reckoner, the usual untapping, works super well with Lotus Field as a almost... So it's mana neutral the turn you play it, and it starts netting you 3 mana, alongside 2 Cast Out as removal, 3 Elesh Norn, and 4 Capricious Hellraiser. That's
the real sauce in the deck, right? The Capricious Hellraiser?
That's the sauce. Exactly. So the plan is, in the early game, play a Lotus Field, sacrifice Emeria Skull or Valakut Awakening, and when you play a Capricious Hellraiser later in the game, thanks to the mana provided both by Lotus Field and Kiora, and Knight of the White Orchid and Fable making treasures, that will allow you to play Emeria Skull, for example, for free from your graveyard alongside a 4/4 flyer, and with Kiora drop to 3 cards.
So Hellraiser turns out to be more powerful with a small graveyard. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So getting 9 cards in the graveyard just introduces too much randomness. Even though you can get it for just 3 mana, it's just not going to be a very powerful creature. But if you have some control over it, if you can give yourself great odds of flashing back an Emeria's Call, or even a flashing back of Valakut Awakening, that's okay. And if you can double that trigger with Elesh Norn, the late game here gets very, very powerful. If you have Kiora in play, Hellraiser draws a card, recasts Emeria's Call, 2 4/4s, draws 2 more cards. If you have Elesh Norn, double all of that. So the late game here looks pretty sweet.
Getting to that late game with only Bonecrusher and Portable Hole alongside Cast Out might be a bit hard, but that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, you don't have a lot to do in the first few turns. You do have some cute stuff, like he's got 4 Knight of the White Orchid here, so the way that would work is it's kind of like a bootleg brought back, right? You play white lands your first 2 turns, float 2 white mana, play your Lotus Field, play Knight of the White Orchid. Is that good? Is that better than brought back? I'm not sure.
But it might be. And worst case scenario, we're not being... I just love brought back. Can we just play brought back? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think not in the Pioneer version.
Yeah, our mana isn't good enough.
This is based on a modern build that I think Aspiring Spike worked on.
Yeah, one of the first brews with Hellkite.
Yeah, use that package of Emeria's Call, Blood Sun, Lotus Field. There you have the pitch elementals, so you're a lot more D'd up in the early turns.
And you also have Cleansing Wildfire that works super well with both the bridges and flagstones as additional ramp.
Additional ramp that also provides additional ways to put Emeria's Call into the graveyard. So it's definitely going to be more consistent at setting up the plush graveyard for the Hellraiser. But, porting that to Pioneer, I think Elesh Norn actually makes a lot of sense. Apart from the whole Lotus Field thing, Elesh Norn makes a lot of sense.
It does. I think it does. Like, this makes a reasonable amount of sense. Like, surprising. Knowing the mastermind it has came from.
Yeah, so that's a sweet new concept for Elesh Norn. Other decks that you might find with Elesh Norn, Enigmatic Incarnation and Pioneer, pretty good deck, plays when Elesh Norn. Sometimes people say they want to. It's extremely powerful there. Omnath Elesh we already talked about. Mono White Devotion, the Mono White Nykthos deck, sometimes plays as many as 4 copies of Elesh Norn. So you'll run into this card in Pioneer for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna face Elesh Norn, want it or not, in the format of your choice, Pioneer or Modern.
So is there anything more to say about the card?
I don't think so. It has seen some fringe play, like Mono White Devotion decklist. I played one as well in the Yorion package. It's super useful there. But besides that, I haven't seen much. Like, it's just a good card. It's straight up a good value mid-range piece that allows for some degenerate stuff if it survives, and it's surprisingly resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, pick up your copies whenever they hit a price that you're comfortable with. I don't know when that will be. Very expensive, new staple, we can say, but yeah, I mean, you can see why. The power is insane.
Yeah.
All right, from there, we transition to our flashback segment. Last week's card was Mindsplice Apparatus, a card that David thought, had some echoes of Wilderness Reclamation.
It has small echoes of it.
Yeah, a little bit. It's 3 and a blue artifact with flash. At the beginning of your upkeep, you add an oil counter to the Mindsplice Apparatus. Then you get a cost reduction on all of your instants and sorceries. They cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on the apparatus. So flash it in on turn 4. Turn 5, all your stuff is 1 cheaper. If you proliferate more counters on it with Experimental Augury or the Monumental Facade, suddenly all your spells are 2 cheaper, and it just gets more and more nuts from there. David had, I think, 3 Pioneer lists that he drew up. I tested 2 of them.
Yeah, I tested one of them, super similar, but yeah, so it was 3 of them? Temur, Azorius, and...
He proposed an Is It list, which I did not get to test.
Oh, okay.
The Is It list was very similar to Chris Botello's Pro Tour list, where it played the Galvanic Iteration Temporal Trespass endgame with a lot of 1-mana cantrips. So a good portion of the deck actually wasn't reduced by Mindsplice Apparatus, but in exchange for that, you had a lot more play without the apparatus in play.
Okay.
But that's not what I tested. I started with the more speculative ones. I started with a Temur build based around Growth Spiral, and I also tried the blue-white build with Wraths and Approach of the Second Sun. Both of these lists played out kind of the same. Despite having a vastly different spell suite, the play patterns and the weaknesses were extremely similar, right? So the Temur builds, ideally you would Growth Spiral on turn 2 for an early apparatus, but if you're not doing that, I mean, it's just a bunch of clunkers. Like, there's literally 0 1-mana spells in this deck. You have 4 Fires of Victory, 4 Experimental Augury, 2 Sweltering Suns, and 2 more on the board. Card draw in the form of Behold the Multiverse, Expansion Explosion, 2 copies, Fight with Fire, 2 copies, MDFCs like Salunti Vision, Jawari Disruption, and 2 Commit to Memory. This is your catch-all removal interactive spell that also allows you to just draw fresh 7 with a massive mana advantage.
Yeah.
It's all well and good, but there's just nothing to do on the early turns.
Sometimes there's nothing you can do.
I just hate decks that don't play 1-drops. I think this is why I keep harping on the Llanowar Elves versus Sylvan Curated thing. I cannot abide these decks. They're so frustrating, especially on the draw.
You just feel so tempo negative on the draw. You feel like you're never catching up with what your opponent is doing.
Exactly. If they play a Llanowar Elf on turn 1 and they're on the play, like, the game's already over. Like, you have no chance in those matchups.
No removal for it, no way to catch up, always playing like on the back.
And that's not even accounting for like Experimental Augury. Like, if that's your first play of the game is Anticipate, you're just not in those games. So the Temur build, I went 2 and 3. I got paired against 3 slow decks and 2 fast decks. The fast decks I lost very quickly, even when they didn't have great draws. Even when they, let me sweep the board a few times, it was just too hard. I lost to a Gruul midrange and a Gruul Splashing Summer Denial, a Temur midrange. The slower decks were where I expected this deck to really shine, right? Like, I'm like a big flashy flash deck with cost reduction and X spells. I should win these matchups. And I did, right? I beat Lotus Field very impressively, just, demolished them with cost reduction. Beat the 5-color Omnath deck where they weren't interacting on the stack. They were just hoping to out-grind me the long game, and they just couldn't do it. Even resolving Slaughter games against me, like, it just didn't work.
It just wasn't enough.
Yeah, it was like, well, I'll expansion your Slaughter games and take out your Leyline Bindings so that you can't stop me. And then you just can't, you can't. One Slaughter games wasn't enough to defang the deck. So that was an easy 2-0 win as well. The matchup where I really thought I would win and instead lost badly was against the Dimir Notion Thief Days Undoing Narset deck. And that was depressing. Like, they were just better at this plan than I was. Like, if you can't win this matchup, I think that you need to rethink the plan.
Yeah. You're just not in a good position.
The fact is that Narset is so powerful with Commit to Memory, and Commit to Memory is pretty good in this shell. I think you just need the Narset's main deck. That maybe means that we shouldn't even be bothering with, like, the Temur colors. Like, Growth Spiral was not that good. I only Growth Spiraled into Apparatus once in all these games, and I paid a huge price in the mana base to accommodate this card. The red sweepers were also, like, not reliable. Like, Fight with Fire was pretty clunky. 3 damage was not enough to stabilize in every situation. As much as I liked Fires of Victory, it was pretty good. I just didn't feel like I was getting enough out of the red half of the deck. And definitely not the green half.
Yeah, definitely not the green half. I think that's like the... Maybe that's why there is an easiest version we haven't tried. We have all reached the agreement that maybe the green part just wasn't convincing. Maybe the red version plays 1 mana removal then. Maybe it does.
It does. I mean, it plays Fire Impulse. I think the list that David sketched, I would probably add more removal to it. Like I just want as much interaction as possible in the early turns. Like I would probably add Fires of Victory to the one we talked about last week and then run that back. But what I tried instead was the blue-white version, which was relying much more on sweepers. 2 Supreme Verdict, 3 Temporary Lockdown, 3 March of Otherworldly Light, so you have a little bit of spot removal to keep them guessing. Then you're playing your 4 Censors, 2 Drawy Disruptions. Divide by 0 becomes the kind of catch-all interaction plus card draw, because you can eventually get a very cheap Mascot Exhibition if the Mindsplice is in play. 4 Mindsplice, 2 Commit to Memory, 1 Behold the Multiverse, and then you're going to win the game with Approach of the Second Sun. You have 1 copy in the main deck, you have 1 in the sideboard, which you can get with your 2 copies of Fae of Wishes. So the idea here is that you're just going to buy as much time as you can with reactive blue-white control, hopefully sneak a Mindsplice into play, and then eventually you'll use your massive mana advantage to just run away with things. Again, I mean, there's absolutely 0 1-mana plays. There's nothing that costs 1 in this deck. I added the 3rd March myself because I thought 2 was not enough, and I would think I would play all 4, having played a league with this now. Even then, I'm still not convinced you have enough interaction. Like, throughout the league, my opponents would play around what they thought was, like, counter magic in my hand. If they could see my hand, they would know. If they could see my deck list, they'd be like, wow, this deck is doing nothing. Like, my hand is like Experimental Augury, Divide by 0, Mindsplice Apparatus. Like, I have no chance of stopping a creature. If they just, like, play their stuff, I would be dead for sure.
I'm not beating a bunch of 3-mana 3/3s.
Right. Like, I got a bunch of extra turns that I shouldn't have gotten because they were, trying to not play into Wraths or something like that. Even then, it was very hard to keep control of the board. I finished this league at 2 and 3. Problems were A, the clunkiness, being on the draw. B, just the over-reliance on Mindsplice Apparatus. It's not impossible to kill it, especially in the age of Boseiju. I lost multiple Mindsplice Apparati. Some of them got killed by a Braid. A bunch of them got Boseiju'd. One of them got Slaughter Games.
Getting Slaughter Games is fine, it's part of the course. Any combo that can be Slaughter Games. But getting Boseiju'd is a bit tougher. Just no way to respond to it, it's just crying.
Yeah, the Augury was like very good after Apparatus and very bad otherwise. Like just getting no value off of the Anticipate. Like there's nothing in here that benefits from Proliferate. Again, it's like if I had Narset, that would be a different thing. If I had Narset, then casting Augury once would give me an extra full card off Narset.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I do not feel motivated to play this deck again. I think we need to
rebuild.
Reduce the curve. Rebuild, reduce, just tighten up a little bit and not rely so much on winning the die roll and having censor up. But again, that's maybe like my bias. You know I hate censors. I just don't like this playstyle in general.
Yeah. Poor Apparatus. I had a lot more hope into it, but at the same time, that was like fake hope. The sort of hope that's like, you seem super fun, but also super bad.
What kind of deck were you interested in?
I don't know. I just wanted to do fun stuff. I just love reclamation builds and hope this would be different, but alas.
So the thing about Reclamation is it costs 0 mana. You cast it on turn 4 and immediately untap. You don't have to just fall behind by a full turn. Apparatus does not repay you immediately. You do fall behind by a full turn. It's like super punishing. If they have anything on board at all, like half your life is gone. Like if they just played a Bloodtithe Harvester on turn 2, even if they played nothing else, you're just letting your life get chipped away. And the best you can do on turn 4 is play a cost reducer. You're just on the ropes. And then the creature lands, you haven't dealt with those at all. So you can even get to the state of the game where you're theoretically winning and still be in danger of just dying to Mutavaults. Yeah,
the fact you're playing a 4-mana cost reducer instead of a free cost reducer, that was the case with Reclamation mostly. Unless you're playing against an instant speed deck, Reclamation used to be a 0-mana cost reducer, right? Even mana positive at times.
Mana doubler for 0 mana. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you can see why it's banned.
I can see why it's banned when I think of it that way.
I knew Wilderness Wreck. I liked Wilderness Wreck. You are no Wilderness Wreck. Sorry.
We cry in rec.
All right, so I'm a little bit lower on the card now, having tried it a couple times. Maybe there's a different build. We can keep messing around with it.
Maybe someday.
The power level is just like a little too swingy right now for me. All right, so that's Mindsplice Apparatus. Just to close things out today, I do want to say a word about Tyvar Jubilant Brawler. That was our first card that we really identified as having a lot of potential, a lot of fun in both Modern and Pioneer. It took a while, right? Like we started testing this in week 1. There weren't a ton of results off the bat, but slowly results are trickling in, and I think it might be worthwhile to just check in and see what's happening with Tyvar.
So, what has been happening with good old Tyvar, Dan? Did he evolve into the beautiful masterpiece we expected him to, or has he been relegated to really bad? What's the name of the changeling?
What, Mord of the Frosts?
Or has he been relegated to Marty of the Frost tier 4 builds?
Oh god. Well, hopefully not that, but people are still trying that combo out. What did we find? Well, the biggest thing we found was that splashing into 3 colors in Pioneer is very punishing, but Tyvar is very good. So maybe the solution is to just tighten up, say we're just going to play black-green. As much as we might be tempted to go into 3rd color for Soul Diviner or whatever else, you're just going to get better mana, better results with clean black-green, play your elves, play your Priest of Forgotten Gods, and it turns out that might just be enough. Those are 12 cards that work with Tyvar. Priest is very important because it allows you to interact. It's a burst of mana, fills the graveyard, Tyvar can get it back. So a successful build has been emerging that uses your 8 elves, it uses 4 priests, it uses Tyvars, it uses Collected Company. You need more tokens, so you play the Lazotep Reaver. This is a 2-mana zombie that brings a token.
It was so bad when I saw it in gameplay. The Reaver was... The fact that Reaver isn't even good, like, if you get it again, because the same zombie grows instead of getting you a new one. I saw Liz playing a full playset, and it was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well, at that point, you might as well sack the Amass token. You know, you have Woe Riders for that, you have your Priests of Forgotten Gods. Some versions go all the way up to Bolas' Citadel, and some do not. Some focus more on, okay, I want my 4 Azulaport Cutthroats, and I also want my extra copies of Vrand, Thane of something, the double Blood Artist. So this build, you know, it's around. It's gotten a few 5.0s. I think Todd Anderson and Doomwake have been playing it a lot on their streams. Some players have tried to take some of the similar shell and moved into Jund colors, so you're paying that cost, but if you move into Jund, you get Bloodtithe Harvester, you get Mayhem Devil, you get Fable the Mirror Breaker. All of those cards work great with Tyvar. So the Jund sack with Tyvar is 4 Llanowar Elves, 4 Cauldron Familiar, 4 Gilded Goose, 4 Witch's Oven, Bloodtithe Harvester and Priest of Forgotten Gods on 2, Mayhem Devil, Tyvar, Fable, and Fatal Push. So just a variant on Rakdos sack that's a little bit faster with the mana dorks and has a little bit more explosiveness out of the graveyard with Tyvar.
Yeah, Tyvar is just amazing. I have seen Tyvar shine in this sort of shell, especially with Bloodtithe Harvester and Priest of Forgotten Gods just being immediate value.
Tyvar giving haste to the Chapter 3 of Fable is also...
Yeah, it's also insane.
If we're willing to go into 3rd colors, there are more fun ideas you can mess with. David's been tinkering with a different Sultai build, not using Soul Diviner, but using Sidisi Brood Tyrant. Do you remember Sidisi? Was this before your time?
I have known Sidisi because of you guys. I have never actually cast a Sidisi.
It was like a fun standard card.
I do, however, see the spicy Eternal Scourge there.
Sidisi costs 4. She will mill 3 when she enters and when she attacks. She gives you 1 zombie anytime a creature is milled.
Yeah. And she's a 4 mana 3/3?
4 mana 3/3, which is not great. So David is thinking, all right, I have my mana dorks to ramp me to 4. I have Fiend Artisan, which finds Sidisi, it can sack a Stitcher Supplier, it can get huge, and it is a tap ability for Tyvar. So Armor Scrapgorger, Fiend Artisan, 4 of each, 1 Priest of Forgotten Gods, 1 Llanowar Loam Speaker. He's not playing mana elves. I think he just doesn't like getting Fatal Push, where I do. So he is playing Spiritual Supplier and 1 Deathrite Shaman. 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Push. So choosing to interact on 1 instead of ramping out. Then you got your 4 Sidisis. Because you're playing the Fiend Artisans, you have a little bit of a creature toolbox. So there's the 1 Eternal Scourge, there's 1 Hostage Taker. There's even, it looks like a Scarab God is in here for when you just really need to grind. This is a fun experimental concept. I think we'll always disagree, me and David, about whether you should play Mana Elves or not, and how many 1-drops you need for this kind of deck. But I think he's deliberately trying to explore something that's different from Sacrifice.
Yeah, I think he's making some suboptimal choices just to try and explain new territories. Maybe the correct build is somewhere in the middle, but he's trying to theory craft first if this is viable, and not just a worse sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, if Scrap Gorger is good in the metagame, then this is an interesting way to take advantage of Scrap Gorger.
Yes.
It's like a little bit anti-synergistic with your own Fiend Artisans. It will shrink your Fiends, but it will provide you incidental graveyard hate. It becomes a decent beater.
An infinite Scourge as well.
Yeah, unlimited Eternal Scourges. I see 3 Tangled Florahedrons in the mana base. That's just like a land that, you know, works with Tyvar, works with Sidisi to mill it for an extra zombie.
Yeah, particularly that.
So the build like has a lot of synergies to it. It'd be fun to test this out and see how it holds up.
Seems like a super fun concept, and the 1-offs alongside Fiend Artisan looks super fun. I just love Hostage Taker as well.
So the interaction that really excites me is like Stitcher Supplier plus Fiend Artisan plus Priest, right? If you have all of those, you have 8 good sack outlets on 2 that also just reward you for stuffing the graveyard full. And if you want to like play Archfiend's Vessel, I mean, maybe that's like a bridge too far.
Yeah, maybe we're going too deep.
Maybe. But if you're willing to port this over into Modern, right, you get access to better mana, and therefore you can play even more colors, right? You can play more exciting stuff. So Aspiring Spike had a sweet version. I love this deck. I'm so tempted to just build this in paper. Tyvar, Fiend Artisan, Priest, Stitcher Supplier, right? That's all there. That's the core. But what do you surround that with? Well, it turns out that, you know, Aether Vial is a great way to get these 2 drops into play in a tempo positive way. Aether Vial also just happens to cast Asmo for free. So this is the long rumored Vial Asmo deck that has never seemed to come together before. But here it is. So 4 Asmo, 4 Cookbook, and 4 Oval Chase Daredevil. The payoff for making all this food is Asmo itself, which Fiend Artisan can just bring into play.
Yeah, for 1 mana.
Exactly. Or you just get Urza's Saga, which is a great way to spend your Priest of Forgotten Gods mana. 4 Tyvars, 4 Unlucky Witness, and 4 Bloodghast.
I have the feeling Fiend Artisan has to do a lot of heavy lifting as a sonky creature in this deck.
Maybe. I mean, maybe you just win with Construct tokens. You need your Priest and your Fiend Artisans to be doing their thing.
Oh, yeah.
Luckily, Tyvar brings them back with haste, so you know, the whole dice removal thing is mitigated somewhat by Tyvar.
Yeah, Tyvar makes it so your need to tap creatures become a lot better. Like immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Better immediately and better whenever you -2 for them.
Also, the 2 Doughty on the sideboard. Tyvar value, deck value, exiles graveyard hate.
Yeah, 2 Doughty Voidwalkers, very nice. So I don't know how powerful this deck is. I don't know if it's like a serious contender, but it looks super fun.
Seems like a super fun build, yeah. One of those we always want to port Pioneer stuff into Modern to improve the mana, and this is one of the few times it might actually be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, Aether Vial, like that's just so beautiful. You don't see a lot of Vial decks. I mean, you do because you play Goblins, but the rest of us don't see a lot of Vial decks these days. There's not that many cheap creatures that also like reward you for having a bunch of extra mana lying around, but this is a deck like that. This for sure is a deck like that. So all of this is to say that Tyvar is doing well. I mean,
it has found a few homes, to say the least. Also, Dangdingo got a 5-0 yesterday with Devoted, so at least he's doing some ways in Modern. Of course, playing for Tyvar.
Yeah, a lot of Devoted Druid decks putting up 5-0s. I've seen Tyvar used in Enchantress decks in the 5-0s. Just getting back your Sanctum Weavers and your Sithis Harvest Hand. There is the long rumored Tyvar More to the Frost combo. I even saw at the Pioneer RCQ that I played last weekend, I saw a player make top 8 with the dungeon combo with Acererak the Archlich, Gwenna, Eyes of Ghent, and Kinnan. They had 4 Tyvars, they had Mana Elves, they had Collected Companies, they had Fauna Shamans. It's a combo that you just like can't play online, it's too many clicks. But the paper version looked pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
So there's a tons of potential homes for Tyvar. It's a super fun card, and it's pretty cheap right now. I just went ahead and bought 4, $3 each. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet, but I'm sure they're going to be fun.
It's a fun card. Like, all the builds you tend to build around it are just fun.
Yeah, and I hope they continue to print new creatures for Tyvar. I'm sure they will.
I mean, any 2 creature with a tap ability is a Tyvar card. There has to be enough.
They just don't print cards like that anymore. They're giving Elesh Norn all the toys and not Tyvar. We need more Tyvar creatures, not more Elesh Norn creatures.
There are not that many, surprisingly. With how many decks the cards have had, I'm surprised they're not. So when I look at Tyvar, I'm like, there has to be a million cards that are amazing with this, and then I start looking and I find like 4. One of them going Goblin Engineer.
It's because tapping is the opposite of ETB triggers. Like, ETB gives you the value immediately, tapping gives you the value next turn. Like, it's just...
Yeah, and these have to be cards that are 0 playable when you don't have Tyvar, and that's the tough line.
It's real tough, yeah. But, nevertheless, Tyvar gives us hope, and yeah, it's a sweet card. Alright, I think we should leave it there. Ton of brews to sort through, and yeah. I'm excited to keep exploring.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun brews. We have Tyvar, we have Elesh Norn, we have good old failures with Mindsplice Apparatus. We have a lot going forward. Besides, who doesn't love playing an Elesh Norn brew just as an excuse to play Timeless Dragon? Oh, I love Timeless Dragon. But yeah, that will be all for us tonight. Thanks so much, Dan, for having me. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope you have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Deck list for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. If you enjoyed this program, help us spread the word. Leave us a review in your favorite podcast app and help us grow the Faithless family. You can also support us directly at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing, where making a pledge at any tier helps keep the show going and gets you access to our wonderful Discord community. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.